Some viewers may find this disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
That was not a joke. If you are squeamish, have a fear of pus or blood, or just have trouble forgetting disturbing things, then you might want to scroll down and click to a new tab. Some of the imagery in this episode is unsettling. Whenever I think of a horrid episode of any show, this is what immediately comes to mind. It's what lets me know that things could always get worse, and to count every single blessing we have. The plot of this episode is simple. Spongebob gets a splinter, and he spends about 11 minutes trying to get it out. If that makes it sound boring, let me tell you that this episode is anything but. In some episodes of SpongeBob, the title card gets fitting background music, like in Spongicus, you get a Roman theme sound. I love here how it plays the same classic tune, like it's saying that it's just another typical episode. As soon as the episode starts, we get our first sign that this was an incredibly terrible idea. It starts out with some incredibly mundane filler, until SpongeBob manages to fling his spatula into the ceiling. He stacks a bunch of boxes to get up, and begins attempting to pull it out. In those boxes were swords and tartar sauce. As soon as SpongeBob pulls his spatula out, he begins falling to the ground. Yeah, I wish. It turns out that he gets saved by dumb luck. And by dumb luck, he trips over some of the tartar sauce and gets the titular splinter jammed into his finger in slow motion. We can see that it goes in pretty damn deep. Then SpongeBob starts trying to pull it out, and we see him cringe as he does it. We see how real the pain feels. The writers and animators are determined to make it seem as painful as possible. I don't know if this is a half-assed attempt at slapstick, or just an attempt to make the audience cringe. If it was the former, you've got to make the pain cartoonish and over the top. Like, say, have a piano fall on someone's head. That's funny because it can't really happen to us. Most of us have had splinters, and some of us have had splinters we couldn't get out. So yeah, we can feel this pain. So eventually, SpongeBob tries to pull it off with his teeth, and ends up ripping his skull out. And that convinces him to leave the splinter in. With the splinter getting in the way, SpongeBob ties the spatula to his nose, and that ends up annoying Squidward. Some cliches never do die. And then Squidward sees the splinter. SpongeBob shows it to him, and some of the pus drips on his face. Are you grossed out yet? 'Cause it gets better. Squidward tells SpongeBob that if he doesn't get the splinter out, then Mr. Krabs will be forced to send him home early. It's at this point that I began to wonder if I was overblowing this episode's vile repulsion, when I called it a shitty abomination of hell. Sure, we've had tons of filler and a little bit of gross out, but that's nothing out of the ordinary for your typical modern SpongeBob episode. And then SpongeBob called Dr. Patrick. So, enter Dr. Patrick. He starts out by chewing on SpongeBob's foot, in grotesque detail. Okay, writers, no one wants to see your sick, unfunny, and uninteresting foot fetish. When SpongeBob tells Patrick this, he gets upset. So to calm him down, SpongeBob decides to do whatever Dr. Patrick says without objection. This is your last chance. If you have an aversion to gross out, you will want to back out now. He sees the splinter and reaches into his medical bag and pulls out a hammer. You know it's coming. He rallies it up, and then he smashes the splinter into the thumb, causing it to swell up to a horrid size. And when Dr. Dipshit sees the swelling, he puts a garbage compress on it, causing it to spew forth pus and turn a sickly purple color. Oh, by the way, it gets worse. SpongeBob goes back inside to find Mr. Krabs and Squidward. SpongeBob is determined to hide a splinter. They're building this up quite a lot, and when it's finally revealed, a huge red abomination with pus and a pulsating red bane. That, no joke, caused me to vomit the first time I saw it. And then we get a close-up on the splinter itself. Mr. Krabs pulls it out, and surprise! Confetti! Haha! No. Pus starts spraying on Mr. Krabs. Oh, and by the way, it wouldn't be a modern SpongeBob episode without at least some Squidward torture porn. Mr. Krabs talks about worksman comp, so Squidward bashes his head in with a cash register, only to find out that his shift ended 2 minutes ago. To call this episode a piece of utter shit would be an insult to shit, pardon the cliche. Without the disgusting visual gimmicks, this episode has no legs to stand on. It wants to gross you out, and if it doesn't, it'll only end up boring you. There is no reason for this episode to exist, other than nausea fuel. It's an excuse to be as gross as possible, and a flimsy excuse at that. I don't know who would be vile enough, repulsive enough, disgusting enough to think that this would be a good idea, and then to actually make a goddamn episode about it? Who wrote this? 3? This episode had 3 writers. How is that possible? How did 3 professional level writers come forth with this crap when a 5-year-old would know better and throw it in the trash? These 3 do not deserve to have jobs. They deserve to be fired immediately and blacklisted. There's putting no effort into something, and then there's putting effort into making something as utterly horrible as possible. Believe me when I say that I know how bad things can get. To answer your question, no. Putting your hoof down is not worse than the splinter. Putting your hoof down is a concept that could have worked in some form of reality. Fuck no. It's just the first one I usually think of when I think of a bad episode. It probably wouldn't even hit the top 10. Well, there's that episode where Mrs. Puff tries to murder SpongeBob, or there's that episode where Mr. Krabs drives Plankton to attempt suicide and is rewarded for it. There's also that episode that makes Squidward looking like he's about to kill himself a running joke. Or if you want to include specials, there's that giant middle finger to anyone who ever gave a damn about SpongeBob. Trust me when I say that I've seen shit.